You think intensity is power. You're wrong. Intensity is a tantrum. It's the emotional outburst of men who can't control themselves. You go hard for 3 days, you post about it, you feel dangerous, then you disappear. That's not strength. That's weakness wearing a costume. Willpower is quiet, relentless, boring, and it never asks for permission or applause. Here's the part that makes weak men uncomfortable. Your big moments don't matter. Your motivation doesn't matter. Your "I'll change my life today" speech doesn't matter. What matters is what you do when nobody is watching and nothing feels exciting. Small daily habits are the difference between men who rule their lives and men who keep starting over like idiots. If intensity worked, every angry man would be successful. They're not. They're broke, inconsistent, and loud. Let me expose something most people are too soft to understand. When I talk about speaking in tongues, I'm not talking about religion. I'm talking about dominance over your own mind. High-level men develop a private language with themselves. Commands, rules, internal signals, no emotion, no negotiation. You don't motivate yourself, you issue orders. You train your brain to respond automatically. That's a tongue-only discipline men speak, and weak men will never hear it. This is how identity actually changes, not with inspiration, with repetition. You do the same small action every day until your nervous system rewires, until hesitation dies, until discipline becomes your default state. That's when you stop being a man who tries and become a man who acts. Small habits are not small. They are daily votes for who you are allowed to become. Skip them, and you vote for weakness. Every single time. Intensity is flashy. Habits are lethal. Intensity burns hot and dies fast. Habits compound quietly and dominate permanently. One is ego. The other is control. Men obsessed with intensity want to feel powerful. Men obsessed with habits actually become powerful. That's why most men hate routine. It exposes their lack of self-mastery. They'd rather feel strong than be strong. Here's the truth. Nobody wants to say out loud, your life is perfectly designed for the habits you repeat. If you're losing, it's because you practice losing daily. If you're average, it's because you rehearse average behavior, like a ritual. Power isn't hidden. It's earned through obedience to your own standards. And if you can't control your daily actions, you don't deserve control over anything else. Most men confuse emotional intensity with strength because it feels powerful in the moment. It feels aggressive. It feels alive. Your heart rate spikes, your voice gets louder, and for a brief window, you believe you've unlocked something special. But intensity is not control. It's a chemical reaction. It's adrenaline, not authority. And anything powered by emotion is unstable by nature. That's why men who rely on intensity are unpredictable, inconsistent, and ultimately ineffective. Look at how intensity actually shows up in real life. It arrives in bursts, a sudden decision to lock in, a late-night promise to change everything, a short phase of extreme effort followed by exhaustion, distraction, or boredom. This isn't discipline. This is a loss of regulation. It's the nervous system swinging from stimulation to collapse. Real power doesn't spike and crash. Real power operates at a constant level regardless of mood, energy, or external validation. Intensity is loud because it needs attention. It demands recognition. It wants to be seen. That alone should tell you something. Anything that requires an audience is not strength, it's insecurity trying to prove itself. Men who live on intensity announce their plans, exaggerate their effort, and dramatize their struggle. Men who operate from control don't talk, they execute. They understand that silence is a form of dominance. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Intensity is often a substitute for consistency. It's what men use when they lack structure. When you don't have systems, you rely on emotion. When you don't have discipline, you chase feeling. Intensity becomes a coping mechanism for disorder. It gives the illusion of progress without requiring long-term responsibility. That's why it feels good and produces nothing. Another problem with intensity is that it teaches your brain the wrong lesson. It conditions you to believe that action requires excitement, that effort must feel extreme to be valid. Over time, this makes ordinary work feel unbearable. The moment the emotional charge fades, execution stops. You've trained yourself to quit the second things become normal. That is the opposite of power. Control, on the other hand, is calm. Controlled men don't wait for a mental surge. They don't negotiate with themselves. They don't need to feel aggressive to act. Their behavior is pre-decided. The decision has already been made, so there's no internal debate. This is what weak men misunderstand. They think force comes from intensity, when in reality it comes from removing choice. Intensity is reactive. Control is deliberate. Intensity responds to external triggers. Control dictates internal standards. One is fragile, the other is absolute. When pressure increases, intensity collapses because it has no foundation. Control becomes sharper because it was built for resistance. That's why disciplined men perform best when things are boring, difficult, or repetitive. They don't rely on stimulation. They rely on structure. You can see this pattern everywhere. The man who trains only when he feels fired up. The man who works hardest only after watching something that excites him. The man who needs constant input just to stay moving. He's not driven, he's dependent. And dependence is weakness, no matter how aggressive it looks on the surface. Real strength is the ability to act without emotional fuel, to execute on low energy, to move forward when nothing feels rewarding. That requires command over your internal state. That requires mastery. Intensity avoids that work. It takes the shortcut. And shortcuts always fail under pressure. The men who actually win are rarely intense. They are methodical, predictable, unshakable. Their output doesn't fluctuate with mood. Their standards don't change with circumstances. They don't chase the feeling of power. They build it through controlled, repeatable action. That is why emotional intensity, for all its drama, remains one of the most common traps keeping men weak, distracted, and stuck in cycles of false starts. Most men lie to themselves about who they are, and they do it with words. They describe themselves using intentions, goals, and future plans, because those things are comfortable and cost nothing. Saying you want more, promising change, and imagining success feels productive, but it produces no evidence. The only thing that exposes your real identity is what you repeat when there is no pressure to perform and no audience to impress. Small habits don't care about your self-image. They reveal it. The reason daily actions matter so much is because they operate below ego. Anyone can act impressive once. Anyone can rise to an occasion, but repetition strips away performance and leaves only truth. If you skip the basics, avoid discomfort, and delay responsibility every day, that is not a phase. That is your character in motion. Identity is not what you claim. It is what your routine quietly confirms. Men underestimate small habits because they don't create an immediate emotional payoff. There is no adrenaline, no applause, no visible transformation in the short term. That's exactly why they are powerful. They bypass motivation and go straight to behavior. Each repeated action sends a signal to your brain about who you are allowed to be. Not who you hope to become, but who you are reinforcing right now. Over time, the brain stops asking questions and starts complying. What makes this uncomfortable is that small habits remove excuses. You can't blame circumstances, timing, or lack of opportunity when the action required is minimal. A single decision done daily has no drama attached to it. You either do it or you don't. And when you don't, the story you tell yourself collapses. This is why most men avoid consistency. It forces honesty. And honesty is threatening when your self-image is inflated. Every small habit is a vote, not for a goal, but for an identity. Wake up late repeatedly, and you are training a man who avoids pressure. Skip training repeatedly, and you are building a man who negotiates with weakness. Delay work repeatedly, and you are shaping a man who escapes responsibility. These patterns are not random. They are rehearsals. And rehearsals become instinct. Men often believe identity changes first and behavior follows. That belief keeps them stuck. In reality, behavior leads and identity chases. You act first, repeatedly, and the mind adjusts its self-concept to match the evidence. This is why discipline feels unnatural at the start. You are acting against your current identity. The discomfort is not a sign you're wrong, it's proof you're interrupting an old pattern. Small habits also eliminate self-deception because they are measurable. There is no interpretation required. You showed up or you didn't. You executed or you avoided. This clarity is rare and dangerous. Dangerous to the ego because it leaves no room for fantasy, but powerful for growth because it gives you direct feedback. Men who improve fastest are not more talented. They are more honest with their daily behavior. There's also a compounding effect most men ignore. One small habit repeated daily does not just build skill, it builds trust with yourself. And self-trust is the foundation of confidence. Not loud confidence, but stable confidence. The kind that doesn't need validation. When you repeatedly do what you said you would do, your nervous system learns that your commands are reliable. That internal alignment creates calm authority. Weak men look for breakthroughs. Strong men build systems. Weak men want transformation to feel dramatic. Strong men understand that real change feels repetitive. The irony is that what feels insignificant today becomes inevitable tomorrow. Identity does not shift in moments. It shifts through accumulation, through quiet, uncelebrated consistency. If you want to know who a man really is, don't listen to what he says. Watch what he does on ordinary days. Watch how he treats the smallest responsibilities. That is where his real values live. That is where his future is being built or destroyed. Small habits are not minor details. They are the daily evidence of who a man truly is and who he is training himself to remain. Most men think dominance is loud. They think it announces itself through aggression, confrontation, and visible force. That belief alone tells you they've never held real authority. True dominance doesn't shout. It doesn't explain itself. It doesn't need witnesses. Discipline is silent because it doesn't seek validation. It functions whether anyone is watching or not, and that's exactly why it terrifies undisciplined men. Discipline is not motivation with better branding. It is a system of obedience. You decide the rules once, and after that, emotion is irrelevant. There is no daily debate, no internal discussion, no bargaining with comfort. The action happens because it has been scheduled, defined, and non-negotiable. This removes chaos from the mind. Chaos is where weakness lives. Order is where power settles in. Men who lack discipline are constantly managing their feelings. They wake up assessing mood, energy, and motivation before deciding what kind of man they will be that day. That alone places them in a submissive position to their own biology. When your actions depend on how you feel, your feelings are in control. Discipline flips that hierarchy. The decision is already made. The body follows. What makes discipline dominant is its predictability. Predictable men are dangerous because they cannot be distracted or manipulated. Their behavior does not fluctuate based on praise or criticism. They don't need pressure to perform because pressure was built into their routine long before it arrived. This is why disciplined men remain calm in chaos. They are not improvising. They are executing a standard. Silence plays a critical role here. Loud effort is often compensation. It's proof-seeking behavior. Men who constantly talk about discipline are usually trying to convince themselves. Men who actually live it don't need language. Their results speak, and even then, they don't point at them. Attention is a distraction. Focus is an advantage. Discipline also eliminates decision fatigue, which quietly destroys most men. Every choice drains cognitive energy. When your day is built on fixed rules, you conserve mental power for things that actually matter. You don't waste attention deciding whether to train, work, or rest. Those decisions are already locked in. This efficiency compounds over time. While others are tired from thinking, disciplined men are still moving. Another uncomfortable truth is that discipline removes excuses entirely. You can't hide behind potential when your routine is visible to you every day. There is no story to tell yourself when the system exposes your behavior clearly. This level of accountability creates pressure, but pressure is not the enemy. Uncertainty is. Discipline replaces uncertainty with structure, and structure creates confidence. Men who operate with discipline develop an internal authority that others instinctively recognize, not because they demand respect, but because they don't need it. Their posture is calm. Their speech is precise. Their reactions are measured. This presence comes from self-command. When a man can control his impulses, his time, and his attention, he becomes difficult to ignore and impossible to dominate. The real reason discipline feels oppressive to most men is because it removes their favorite escape, negotiation. No more just this once. No more emotional loopholes. No more exceptions that quietly become habits. Discipline demands consistency, and consistency exposes character. That exposure is uncomfortable, especially for men who prefer the illusion of strength over the work of building it. Discipline does not make life exciting. It makes life effective. It creates momentum without drama and progress without noise. Over time, this quiet dominance reshapes identity. You stop seeing yourself as someone who tries and start seeing yourself as someone who executes. That shift changes how you move, how you speak, and how you're perceived. In the end, discipline is not about restriction. It is about authority. Authority over time, authority over impulse, authority over self. And men who possess that authority don't need to announce it. They walk into rooms already in control because they mastered the hardest territory first, themselves. Most men are obsessed with the idea of transformation, but they misunderstand how it actually happens. They wait for a mental shift, a breakthrough moment, a sudden change in how they see themselves. They think identity is something you discover first and then express through action. That belief keeps them stuck in endless preparation. Identity does not lead behavior. Behavior drags identity behind it, whether you like it or not. The mind is not convinced by thoughts. It is convinced by evidence. You can tell yourself you are disciplined, focused, dangerous, or driven, but your brain does not accept verbal claims. It only accepts patterns. Repetition is the language the nervous system understands. When you perform the same action again and again, especially when it is uncomfortable, your brain updates its internal model of who you are. Not because you felt inspired, but because the data became undeniable. This is why inspiration is overrated. Inspiration creates emotional spikes, not structural change. It makes you feel different without requiring you to behave differently for long enough. Repetition does the opposite. It feels ordinary, sometimes irritating, sometimes dull, but it forces alignment. When your actions contradict your old self-image repeatedly, the mind has no choice but to adapt. Identity shifts to reduce internal conflict. At the beginning, repetition feels forced. That resistance is not random. It is the old identity defending itself. You are acting like a man you are not yet, and the mind resists because consistency threatens familiarity. Most men misinterpret this friction as a sign they are doing something wrong. In reality, it is proof they are disrupting a long-standing pattern. Comfort is not truth. Familiarity is not correctness. What repetition does better than anything else is remove ambiguity. One action might be luck. Two actions might be coincidence. Repeated behavior becomes a signal. When you show up again and again, especially when it would be easier not to, your internal narrative changes. You stop asking, "Am I this kind of man?" and start assuming it. Confidence grows not from affirmation, but from predictability of your own behavior. Men who chase inspiration are dependent on external input. They need something to push them, excite them, or emotionally charge them. Men who rely on repetition are self-contained. Their system runs whether conditions are perfect or hostile. This independence is where real confidence forms, not loud confidence, not performative confidence, but quiet certainty, the kind that does not fluctuate. Another reality most men avoid is that repetition removes the option to lie. You can fake intensity, you can fake ambition, you cannot fake consistency. Repeated behavior produces a trail of evidence that either supports your self-image or destroys it. This is why repetition is uncomfortable. It exposes gaps between who you think you are and how you actually live. Many men would rather stay inspired than be exposed. Repetition also changes how effort feels. At first, everything feels heavy because you are acting against inertia. Over time, the same actions feel lighter, not because they became easier, but because resistance faded. What once required force becomes automatic. This is the real shift people mistake for becoming motivated. It's not motivation. It's normalization. The behavior has been accepted as part of who you are. Identity at its core is a set of expectations you have about yourself. Repetition rewrites those expectations. When you consistently act with discipline, your mind begins to expect discipline from you. That expectation changes future behavior without conscious effort. This is how men become reliable, dangerous, and effective, not through belief, but through proof accumulated over time. Men who understand this stop chasing mental states. They stop waiting to feel ready. They focus on the only thing that actually rewires identity: repeated, controlled action. Over time, the man who once struggled to act becomes the man who struggles to stop. And that is not a mindset shift. That is a structural change built through repetition. Most men worship motivation because it feels powerful in the moment. It gives them a surge, a sense of direction, a temporary identity upgrade. They feel different for a few hours or a few days and mistake that feeling for progress. But motivation is emotional weather. It changes without warning. It disappears the moment discomfort shows up. Building a life on motivation is like building on sand and acting surprised when it collapses. Motivation is unreliable because it depends on internal chemistry and external stimulation. Sleep, stress, praise, rejection, boredom, hunger, any of these can shut it down instantly. That means a motivated man is always one bad day away from quitting. He's productive only when conditions are friendly. That is not strength. That is dependency disguised as drive. The real danger is that motivation trains men to wait. Wait to feel ready. Wait to feel confident. Wait to feel energized. Over time, this creates a passive mindset where action becomes conditional. If the feeling isn't there, nothing happens. Days slip by. Opportunities decay. The man tells himself he will act tomorrow when the feeling comes back. Tomorrow becomes a habit. And that habit quietly destroys momentum. Habits operate in a completely different dimension. They don't ask how you feel. They don't require excitement. They trigger action automatically because the decision was already made in the past. This is what makes habits permanent. They bypass emotion and go straight to execution. Once installed, they keep working even when motivation is dead, tired, or distracted. Most men don't realize how exhausting motivation actually is. Constantly psyching yourself up drains mental energy. It forces you to relive the same internal debate every day. Should I train today? Should I work today? Should I stay disciplined today? Each question weakens you. Habits eliminate those questions entirely. There is no debate, there is only action. This conservation of mental energy compounds into long-term dominance. Motivation also inflates ego without building structure. It makes men feel powerful before they've earned control. This is why motivated men talk more than they act. They announce plans, they visualize outcomes, they emotionally rehearse success. Habits don't allow fantasy. They require behavior, and behavior exposes reality quickly. Another flaw in motivation is that it collapses under boredom. The moment progress slows, motivation fades. But boredom is not a problem. Boredom is the environment where habits thrive. Habits don't need novelty, they need repetition. This is why men who rely on habits outperform talented men who rely on motivation. Talent waits. Habit moves. Permanent change only happens when action becomes automatic. Not heroic, not intense. Automatic. When you no longer need to convince yourself. When execution feels normal. Motivation can never achieve this because it is, by definition, temporary. Habits are stable. They operate whether life is exciting or miserable. They keep you moving forward at full medios. It's trying to pull you backward. Men who understand this stop chasing motivation entirely. They design systems that function in low-energy states. They plan for resistance, not inspiration. They expect friction and build around it. This makes them dangerous because they don't stop when enthusiasm fades. They don't collapse under monotony. They keep accumulating progress while others reset. The truth most men avoid is simple. If motivation were enough, your life would already look different. The fact that it doesn't is proof of its weakness. Habits don't promise excitement, they promise results. And results are the only thing that turns potential into power. Most men don't need advice, they need a mirror. And the mirror is ruthless. It doesn't care about intentions, background, or excuses. Your current life is the clearest record of what you practice every day. Not what you think about, not what you plan, what you repeatedly do. Outcomes don't lie, they don't misinterpret, they don't exaggerate. They simply reflect. Men like to believe their situation is temporary, accidental, or misunderstood. They call it bad timing, bad luck, or a rough phase. That story protects the ego, but it blocks progress. If your habits were producing strength, clarity, and leverage, those things would already be visible. Results arrive on schedule. Delay usually means avoidance, not destiny. Every routine is training something. Even the habits you don't notice are shaping you. Scrolling instead of working, delaying instead of deciding, comfort instead of pressure. These are not neutral behaviors. They are repetitions, and repetition creates direction. Whether you intend it or not, you are practicing a version of yourself every day, and practice hardens into identity. The dangerous part is that these habits feel harmless in isolation. Skipping one session doesn't look like failure. Wasting 1 hour doesn't feel like collapse. Avoiding one uncomfortable decision feels justified. But habits don't work in isolation. They stack. And over time, the stack becomes your life. This is how men wake up years later confused about how they ended up average, frustrated, or stuck. Nothing dramatic happened. Nothing needed to. They practiced their way there. Men often talk about wanting control, but control is not a desire. It's a consequence. You don't think your way into authority, you earn it through consistent alignment between decision and action. When that alignment is missing, confidence collapses. Not immediately, but gradually. You stop trusting yourself. You hesitate more. You avoid pressure. This erosion is invisible until it's complete. Your habits also determine your tolerance. What you repeat becomes normal. If you repeatedly choose ease, discomfort feels unbearable. If you repeatedly choose effort, pressure feels ordinary. This is why two men can face the same challenge and experience it differently. One feels overwhelmed. The other feels activated. Their habits train them for different realities. Most men wait for a turning point. a moment that forces change. But turning points are rare and unreliable. Habits are constant. They don't wait for permission. They don't need a dramatic event. They quietly build or destroy momentum every single day. That's why responsibility is unavoidable. You're either deliberately shaping your habits or unconsciously surrendering to them. The harsh truth is that average results come from average behavior repeated faithfully. Exceptional outcomes come from disciplined behavior repeated relentlessly. There is no gap in between, no hidden shortcut, no secret edge. The evidence is visible in how you spend your time, how you respond to discomfort, and how often you follow through. Men who accept this stop complaining. They stop blaming. They stop explaining. They start adjusting behavior at the smallest level because they understand leverage lives there. A minor daily correction repeated consistently outperforms any dramatic but short-lived effort. Your life is not a mystery. It is a receipt. It shows exactly what you paid for with your time, attention, and energy. If you want different outcomes, you don't need a new identity. You need new repetitions. And those repetitions begin the moment you stop arguing with reality and start obeying it. To listen carefully, forget intensity, forget motivation, forget hype. Build habits so small they feel insulting, then execute them with military precision every single day. That's how men are forged. That's how identities are rewritten. That's how dominance is built. Not with noise, with discipline. And if that sounds boring to you, good. That's exactly why most of you will never make it.